How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be giving you guys 5 movie recommendations for if you're a fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Before we get into it, I want to say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made. Grungy realism and a great iconic set of villains. It's a really cool movie. However, when you look at auto-generated film recommendations, they'll bring up things like, oh, if you like Chainsaw, if you're buying this on Amazon, how about you buy Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween? And yeah, if you like Chainsaw, you probably like those other 2 movies and go check them out, they're great. But other than being slashers, they're not really that similar to Chainsaw. And I wanted to take a moment to recommend movies that really go with Chainsaw, have kind of a similar feel or similar ideas, movies that connect relatively well. I do want to say, though, I won't be copping out and recommending the sequels. I feel those are too obvious of a recommendation, but that being said, if you guys haven't seen the sequels, at least check out Tobe Hooper's Part 2. The rest of the series has its ups and downs. I think it's worth watching, although sometimes in a goofy, ironic way. But at least check out Part 2, so that's a bonus recommendation. Speaking of bonus recommendations, though, if you guys are Chainsaw fans and there's a movie that you think has a good Chainsaw feel, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I would love to hear you guys' recommendations. If it's something I didn't think of, and you think, hey, Chainsaw fans should watch this, go ahead and leave a recommendation. I'd be more than glad to hear it. So anyway, 5 recommendations for Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans. And I figure we'd start off with another Tobe Hooper movie. A few years after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he would make the movie Eaten Alive. And I always thought that Eaten Alive was what Tobe Hooper wanted to do instead of a traditional sequel. Eaten Alive is about this guy. He owns a hotel, and behind the hotel there's a swamp, and in the swamp he has his pet alligator, and he's going to be killing people and feeding them to his alligator. Great, insane, crazy moments. It's not as good as Chainsaw, not as focused, and you don't have the family, but I think this is what Tobe Hooper wanted to do, is go to different places in America, find secluded back roads, and talk about the horrors that might be lurking there. If this wasn't called Eaten Alive, and instead he had called it the Louisiana Gator Massacre, I think this point would have been driven home better. But I think it does fit pretty well. It's the same director just a few years later, keeping that grungy style, keeping that horror of the back road style. Like I said, not as good as TCM, but still worth a watch. And also has a young Robert Englund. Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street is in this movie. He is Buck, and if you're fans of Quentin Tarantino, you know what Buck likes to do. And he's quoting this movie. Anyway, after that, if we're talking about a movie based on backroads cannibals, there's another famous backroads cannibals movie, also very grungy and from roughly the same time period. This is The Hills Have Eyes. I always thought that Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes would make a really great double feature. This one, you get a family who is going off the main road to look for an abandoned silver mine. They're just tourists. However, when their car breaks down, they find a creepy family of cannibals living in the hills that is going to pick them off one by one to eat them. Very grungy, very cool. This is actually an early film from Wes Craven, and it does have kind of that same attitude, that same grunge, a very good survival movie, and also a very good evil family movie. We have Pluto here, played by Michael Berryman, as the standout of the family, but we do have other family members. Papa Jupiter and his wife, who we only know as Mama, I believe, Mercury and Mars, but we also get young Ruby, the only daughter in this group, who's questioning her family's ways. And yeah, grungy backroads horror, crazy cannibalistic family, and that, yeah, it's very similar mentalities, plus Tobe Hooper and Wes Craven. We're talking about two big icons in horror, and I would definitely think that these two would make a great double feature. Anyway, I mentioned earlier that Eaten Alive I kind of feel is the unofficial Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but how about the unofficial Texas Chainsaw Massacre 5? This movie I only have in a multi-pack. This one is Butcher Boys. Butcher Boys, brief explanation, Kim Hinkle, who was, I believe, a writer in the very first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he would go on to create Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 4, The Next Generation, which kind of has a cult following, crazy Matthew McConaughey and all that. Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 4 would be the end of the original run, and it wasn't necessarily supposed to be. This movie, Butcher Boys, Kim Hinkle originally wanted to be Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 5. The project never really got off the ground. They lost the rights and they had to rebrand it as its own IP. Basically, this movie, I think it's San Antonio, it's set more in the big cities, and we actually get grungy cities, which is different for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you get a group of young people that kind of inadvertently run into this what appears at first to be a gang, and they kind of do, for the first half of this movie, a chase through the back streets of San Antonio. However, in the halfway mark, no major spoilers, but the conspiracy is uncovered. There's a bunch of crazy cannibals in this sort of underground society, and they're kidnapping and eating people, but this time in a city environment rather than the country. And I can guess that when this movie was Chainsaw Part 5, there would have been an explanation about how the family had to flee and hide in the city or something. But we do definitely get people that resemble the Chainsaw characters. A character a little bit like Leatherface, a character a little bit like the old man, and when we see these people just go nuts like the Chainsaw family, you really do see, oh yeah, this was supposed to be Chainsaw Part 5. So again, another one I definitely recommend for Chainsaw fans, an unofficial entry into the series. And if you like that energy, it's got that same energy here. Anyway, after that, another movie that I only have in a multi-pack, and this one is A Real Friend. A Real Friend from this 6 Films to Keep You Awake multi-pack. In this movie, a young girl, and she has a mother, and it's a single mother raising this girl on her own. She doesn't know what happened to her father, but in the time when she's alone and the mom's not at the house, she's secretly watching scary movies, including a legally distinct version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And because horror movies are kind of her outlet, her escapism, her imaginary friend is Leatherface, or a legally distinct version of Leatherface. But, yeah, this is a movie where a young girl has Leatherface as her imaginary friend. That's such a funny concept, you know, seeing Leatherface sitting at a desk in a children's school, and the girl's like, be quiet now, I'm trying to study. You know, there's some funny elements there. And she also sees another character who she believes is a vampire, but Leatherface is imaginary. What's up with this other guy? It's a pretty cool movie. It's not as gory as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it definitely is a different feel, but I have to recommend a movie with Leatherface as a kid's imaginary friend to Chainsaw fans. This whole 6 films to keep you awake set is a Spanish language collection. I don't know if they have any other releases of this. This may be the only way to buy this film in America. This is from Lionsgate, but definitely a recommendation there. And the last one is one that you guys probably have heard about because it's a very recent movie. But that being said, this movie is one that if you talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre recommendations, you kind of have to mention this one. It's very chainsaw and actually also has a bunch of elements from Eaten Alive as well. And this movie is, of course, Ty West's new film, X. X is about a group of young people who are renting this cabin in order to secretly shoot an adult film. However, the lady and her husband will eventually find out, and they're old, and they're not young and living a happy life anymore, and seeing these young people shoot this film is going to trigger them, and they're going to go into this crazy attack mode. You know, you get lots of stuff from Chainsaw in this film. Chainsaw is a very clear inspiration. You get that Texas heat beating down on this movie and all that sweat. You get young people rolling through the countryside in a van, but you also get some cool, crazy kills, and you do get the, you know, the sort of house hidden off in the middle of nowhere. Overall, very, very Texas Chainsaw Massacre inspired, but also one of the best slashers to come out in the past few years. This actually came out relatively close to Netflix's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this really does feel more like a sequel to Chainsaw than the official Netflix one did. I can't recommend this movie enough. This is one of the best slashers over the last few years, and yeah, really, really heavily Chainsaw inspired. Definitely would recommend that. Really, go check out X. Anyway, that was 5 movies that I think if you're Chainsaw fans, you'll probably like, but don't let it just be me. If you guys are Chainsaw fans and you know a movie that you think is kind of like Chainsaw, you think it's really good, and you think Chainsaw fans would like it, let me know in the comments and I'll try to check it out, see if I can find it somewhere. Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Texas Chainsaw Massacre playlist. I reviewed a lot of the sequels in there. Definitely looking forward to finishing up sometime soon. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Relevant playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.